Good morning and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. The Bible is full of interesting stories, and frankly, there are many stories we are unfamiliar with. Many of us know some of the big stories in the Bible, but aren't so well versed in the stories that don't draw quite the attention the big stories do. Nevertheless, these small stories often have important messages of grace to teach us, and that's true of the story we're going to look at this week. I'm calling it The Curious Tale of Mephibosheth. If you've even heard of Mephibosheth, I would be surprised. He is one of those names that when we come across it in Bible study, I jokingly say, that would be a great thing for you to name your next dog. Actually, the story of Mephibosheth is a small part of a much larger story, the story of the rise of David to be God's chosen king over Israel. And I think that by the end of the week, we might see that the forgiveness and grace and unconditional love that David has received from God is lived out and modeled through the story of Mephibosheth. The story of Mephibosheth will start explicitly tomorrow, and today I'm going to set the stage for you to bring you up to where Mephibosheth appears for the first time. When Samuel was serving as judge over Israel, eventually the people came to him and said, "All the nations around us have a king. We want a king too." And Samuel replied, "You won't like it if you have a king. He will charge you taxes and instill enforced servitude." The people said, "We want a king like everybody else." When Samuel went to God with their request, God answered, "It's not you who they have rejected. It is me whom they have rejected from being king over them. I will show you who to choose." And sure enough, not long after that, God chose Saul, and Samuel anointed him. And things started out pretty well, but eventually they turned bad, and God told Samuel to anoint another king in secret, a shepherd boy named David. You probably know the story of what happened soon after that, the one about David and Goliath. But in the years that followed, David's fame and honor grew, and the more it did, the more jealous Saul became. David used to play his harp and sing to calm Saul's moods, but sometimes Saul would get so enraged that he would try to kill David. Meanwhile, David developed a fond and fast friendship with Saul's son, Jonathan. Let me be clear at this point. If something happened to Saul, you would expect Jonathan to accede to the throne. David, however, has been anointed to do that, and the two of them are devoted friends. There's a long period of King Saul hunting David and trying to kill him, but David never lifts a finger to harm Saul, believing that it isn't his place to do away with God's chosen king. That's God's prerogative to do in God's time. Finally, the Philistines rise up against Israel again, and Saul has to stop pursuing David to lead the nation in war against the Philistines. And of course, like any king would, he leads the battle, and with him are his sons, including Jonathan. And so the stage is set for the entrance of Mephibosheth. But already the story brings questions for reflection to us. How often have we rejected God from being king over us? How often have we, like King Saul, turned away from God's word and way and felt estranged from God? How often have we grown jealous of someone who seems to be taking our place? How often have we taken action in our own hands instead of waiting for God to act in God's time? How often have we let our own ambitions stand in the way of a friendship? And so, again, the stage is set for the appearance tomorrow of Mephibosheth. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.